Welcome to the On Your Mind podcast, where we are changing the mental health narrative, bringing hope and solutions. Here's your host, Timothy J. Hayes, psychologist.
Ken Ijichi is a nurse who has worked diligently in his career to help others. And when he himself had a mental health challenge, he acquired lived experience of the difficulties of navigating through a system that just wants to treat symptoms with medications. He was lucky enough to get connected to Inner Fire in Vermont, and through his work at Inner Fire, his own personal work, he has decided to stay on and become a guide for others. Ken will tell us a little bit about his personal story and how he feels the work at Inner Fire is unique and exceptionally effective. I was hoping you could tell us a little bit about your personal story and what brought you to Inner Fire and how you ended up being a guide there.
Yeah, I decided to go to nursing school in my late 20s. I already had my business degree when I graduated from University of Buffalo when I was 22, 23, and then I was working a lot. And I was in the corporate world. I was working for so many different companies. One of the longest company I worked for was banking industry, but I didn't feel fulfilled. So in my late 20s, I decided I really need to do something with my life. I want to help people. And I saw working in finance would make me feel I'm helping people. But in reality, I didn't feel like it. I didn't feel like I was, helping people. So I decided I want to invest and become a nurse, registered nurse. And I went back to school in Erie Community College. I personally had, interaction with psychiatry when I was little. I moved different schools, and I really felt like psychiatry can really, we definitely need to put more effort into psychiatry. And really sad, but when I was doing my psychiatric clinical, one of the big hospital in the region, I was able to see what happens in the back and how they treat people and how I was taught to treat people, how I was taught to talk to the patients. And I felt it was very inhumane. It was not therapeutic. They taught me therapeutic communication. And I was asking a lot of questions about that because I'm like, okay, so what do you mean by therapeutic? And because some people hear voices and, I had to be therapeutic and, they were talking different way. I was questioning a lot, and I was questioning one of the instructor. After a while, instructor, everybody else, all the other clinical, my fellow students already left, and I was one of the last students to leave. And I would just wanted to know because I was there to learn, I was there to learn because I didn't have a clear understanding just yet. Maybe because I was asking too much question, or maybe she didn't like me. She came close to me and pat me on the back, on my shoulder, and asked me, "Hey, Ken, do you want to be in there?" No, that's what I saw. And she just walked away from me. And
so when you say she asked you, do you want to be in there? Do you mean she was asking if you want to be a patient in the hospital?
Exactly.
Okay.
And I really felt like they were over medicated, and they did have issues which they weren't really allowed to talk about in the open. In the facility, they didn't really have like any meaningful work. They were just staring at walls. There's nothing to do in these hospitals, and food were processed food, and it just wasn't therapeutic overall. And once I graduated, that was just one experience, one data point. So I just like, okay, well, maybe psychiatry, I really just ran away from psychiatry. I became a registered nurse in operating room after graduation. I passed NCLEX and became operating room nurse. But I saw I was helping and, using my, gift, and I was helping people in a critical condition and stuff like that. But somehow that didn't fulfill me either. And while doing this, I was doing a lot of crazy shifts like a lot of nurses do. Like they have like amazing shifts, doing like, during a day shift, night shift, day shift, night shift, overnight, like so many nurses does that. I was part of that cycle too as well. And I was just trying to make it work with caffeine, Red Bull, and so many other things that people use. And during when I actually started nursing school, and when I learned about ADHD, I saw many of the symptoms because symptom matched my behavior. So I got diagnosed with ADHD, and I started getting Ritalin and also Adderall too as well as a student. I think I might have started maybe around 28 years old. So, and at that time, it really did help me. It did help me read, because until then I just couldn't focus. I couldn't read. I'm reading a paragraph and I forget where I am, and I had to read a paragraph and I forget I am, and I thought I was just stupid. But when I took the Adderall and Ritalin starting, I was able to read straight and I was able to retain that information. And I'm like, oh, okay, so I was starting to buy into this, like, chemical model of human body, because it's like, oh wow, I'm getting results, so this must be true to a certain extent. So I'm, at least I'm getting the benefits, so I need to use this until I can get there. But once I became a professional, once I started working, I was taking Ritalin. I was taking Adderall at that point, Adderall extended release. And on top of that, I was drinking Red Bulls and all these other coffee just to keep up with the shifts and everything. It eventually came to a breaking point, and I had a manic episode. It led to different things, including my, I got terminated from my work, and I started to see many different symptoms. And also that's when I started to experiment with cannabis too as well. And cannabis, it was very interesting to me because it initially gave me some space to be in touch with different part of myself, which I really haven't been in touch with my emotional side for the longest time. And somehow this thing actually loosened something to actually be able to get out of my shell or my pattern of behavior. So initially it did help me, but eventually I got addicted to that, and I started to have bipolar symptom. And I was unemployed, and I was getting psychiatrists did an assessment on me, and she diagnosed me as bipolar. And I'm like, okay, great, so we have a diagnosis, so how can I go back to my previous level of functioning? Because I was functioning as a registered nurse for a long time. I was being able to do everything that nurses did, and I was able to keep up. But I was very neurotic. I just couldn't. My attention was very intense, but at the same time, I couldn't sync in with other people who wasn't in my I guess vibration per se, or like my level of excitement. And it was very difficult for me to actually adjust to people's different thoughts and everything like that. And I couldn't read, even with pills, and without pills too, I couldn't read either. I seeked other doctors and psychiatrists too as well, but they just told me, it's like, hey, Ken, you have to be on a pill for the rest of your life. That's all we can give you. I'm sorry. And one of the person who, the nurse nurse practitioner was just crying with me because she was a nurse, and it was a Zoom call, and there was also another nurse who was actually just shadowing her because she was trying to be a nurse practitioner too as well. And there was all three of us being a nurse, and we were all just crying because we realized it can happen to any of us. That nurse can be just like me. We could easily switch place. This can happen to anybody. And she was just crying, I'm sorry, this is all I can offer. And so that was devastating. And at the time, I was trying to search on the internet, but I was mainly using Google to search, what other alternative is there out there. And I really didn't know about like how tech industries actually be controlled by, different entities and stuff like that. I didn't know the information was so manipulated, convoluted, that I was in a bubble. And me personally, I didn't know anything about American politics. I'm a first generation American. My parents came from Japan, And there's a huge American influence in Japanese medical system and everything like that too. My parents were born after World War II, and they were indoctrinated into like essentially what U.S. model is. So my parents just think I just went crazy. Kenneth started to do drugs. That's the reason he became like this. No, there was other problem before that. It was a tipping point. I just couldn't take it anymore. And drug might have triggered it, but at the same time, there was other fundamental issue I had to deal with, and it was very difficult for me for some type of fate. My sister was working for philanthropist in New York City, and she knew my situation, and she knew that I didn't want to take medication. So I think she was talking to whoever would listen to her, and one of the person who was able to listen was like the person who does philanthropist in this field. And she was able to get informed by really this I guess I would say upper echelon class of people in this country that, hey, we know about this, and this is like a resource that you should give me. And she kind of passed along this information to me, and one of them was Inner Fire. And I checked out the website, and at the time I couldn't read that much. I just looked at the price. It's like, oh wow, that's really expensive. And I'm like, okay, reading it a little bit, I'm like, I didn't really understand it. The wording, I didn't really understand. It was such a foreign to me, which was surprising because I graduated from nursing school. I mean, I read like medical paper. I can kind of understand. I can follow along. But when I was reading Inner Fire thing, I'm like, what do you mean? Like, like you're talking about soul, spirit. Why are you talking about that? It's like, I had no idea when it comes to that, because our medical paradigm, our materialistic reality, we live in, like our system denies the existence of stuff like that. So they don't talk about it like that. They don't use the language like that. But when I saw Beatrice's interview, she knew something that maybe somebody else doesn't, because she was talking in a very sure way, based on certain type of sets of rule that I might have not understand. But it seemed that she knew something. So I was very curious, and I paid the fee. I did the 3-day visit. And because and it was a very scary proposition too at the time for me to even acknowledge that something like this can help. I mean, it's a huge implication, because saying that, okay, so rich people knows how to heal people, and you have to do something really different from the medical paradigm. And this is truth. And my question is, why is the truth in such a remote area? Why isn't the truth in the system where insurance company, why don't you pay for therapy that works? Because she's talking about art therapy, speech therapy, and like movement-based therapy. Why does the insurance company pay that? Even trying to even entertain the idea that insurance company and medical system is actually not looking at, looking out for the well-being of the patient. That's a scary, scary proposition. But I was out of options. So I was like, okay, I got to look at all options. I had to look at everything. I had to widen my scope. So I came to Inner Fire, and I was looking at it, and they were doing different things in nature, and the language they used here among people are very warm, gentle, nurturing. I felt like a kid in school, like in elementary school, and just nice teachers. Different teachers are around. They're not like a staff member. They're not here to monitor us or anything like that. They're just here to guide us. And it was really interesting, because one of the first walks I did too, because I was just looking at this as a way to collect data for me, because I needed data, because I really think I didn't have enough data about how everything works. So one of the things I really paid attention to was that we do this morning walk every morning after breakfast, and we walk. And back then, we used to go and walk and go to this where there's trees, because we're in a forest and stuff like that. And we go and find our own tree, and we touch them, or we can just stand in front of it. You can have a dialogue. You can touch it and just have a moment with the tree. So that was something we did. And I remember people, watching American TV and stuff like that. I'm like, they were always making fun of tree hugger and stuff like that. And I'm like, tree hugger, we make fun of them, therefore it's not real. It's funny because it doesn't work. That's what the joke is about. And that's the reason that's how I was programmed to look at. But then I'm like, wait, this place is really expensive. They wouldn't do anything without a reason. And then I had to get into metaphysical of like, there's like other thing, like, a grounding, an earthing movement. I saw like electromagnetic field of a human being gets affected by these like environments, in these natural environment. And so it blew my mind. And, that's one of the things. And I mean, there's so many other things, how movement-based therapy helps, and how music actually affects our consciousness and how our emotional body it works, and how it's so interesting because when I was actually in here for 3-day visit, I was doing all these therapy with them, and I was working the garden and stuff like that, doing this and that. There's this part of me was really starting to split, because there's this part of me that's trained registered nurse from school. I graduated within past 5 years and stuff like that. So I'm like, I have the most up-to-date information, or so-called from the system, and this part of me is saying that these doesn't work, is what I learned. But the thing is, like, I have a cultural background. I'm a Japanese American, and also I have a Buddhist background. Hey, my people, Japanese people, has been doing this for ages. Japanese monk has been doing this for ages. Something similar to this, but at the same time, different spiritual sects in the world, around the world, are doing this. Isolation from society, and communion with the nature, and getting to know yourself, getting into your body, and practicing. Shaolin Temple is another famous one. A lot of people know. A lot of people saying, "Oh yeah, they want to be strong." No, it's a meditation for them. It's for them to actually become fully in their body. Because if you're fully in the body, you should be able to do this movement exactly 100 times. And a lot of people can't do that because they're not in their full. It's a meditation. A lot of people get distracted with this movie and stuff like that. But that's what many of these monks and spirituality were meant to do. But at the same time, there's spiritual part of me and cultural part of me that was saying, no, this definitely works. And there was this modern part of me is saying, no, this doesn't work. So there was battles starting to happen. And after the 3 days, I really appreciated what I saw. I wanted to stay, but financially I couldn't stay. So I said thank you to Beatrice and everybody here. And I decided to dig deeper. I had unemployment, which was a blessing. I bought a van, and I started to just travel. And I wouldn't recommend this to everybody, but it was a plan that came to me, and I'm like, I have to do this because I have to get real data from real people. And the thing is, another thing I realized is that people are in this cocoon of their comfort zone, and I was in my cocoon, and I need to get information that's outside of my cocoon. And I had to go somewhere because my parents doesn't know, my immediate friends and family doesn't know anything about what's happening in the medical industry or pharmaceutical industry. And I can't just ask Beatrice because I don't know which information I need from her. So I had to do a lot of my own digging, and I kind of had to do a footwork because my mind was so gone to the point that I couldn't use the internet, that I couldn't find the information. At least I didn't know the keyword and stuff like that. So I started a van life and really interacted with the homeless population, because I need to see the other side. I need to collect more data because I was told certain things, and many of the data I have is actually coming from misconception that was fed to me by TV shows and news station. And I was starting to think that maybe I'm actually missing a lot of information.
So how long did you live in a van?
About a year. I went to different city, different town. I was talking to a lot of addicts, and I went to a lot of drug houses and stuff like that.
So what brought you back to Inner Fire after that?
So
because at this point you had spent 3 days at Inner Fire.
Yeah.
And then you left and bought a van and traveled for a year and had a lot of various experiences with all kinds of people in homeless conditions and experimenting with drugs or having their own mental challenges. And how did it bring you back to Inner Fire?
So this kind of gets into I really went back to Beatrice. I was still in contact with Beatrice, and I tried so many different things. I found other people who wanted to heal. I was trying to create a community just like Inner Fire, but in a homeless community, because I was able to get them to buy into this idea. Hey, if we actually just create something together and be nice to each other and be kind and gentle with each other, and then this can lead to healing. But doing that in the city where there's drugs and other temptations, it was impossible. I was telling all these experiences to Beatrice, and she was able to say maybe I can actually be eligible for the scholarship. So I applied, and I was trying to fundraise. And at this point, my parents were not going to help me. It was too much money for them. Later that day, Beatrice emailed me. I said I can come back to Inner Fire. And I was like, wow, what? It blew my mind. Something changed. I don't know what, but that's how I got back to Inner Fire. Somehow money came and I was able to go back. And I was able to learn a lot. And I was able to come back to this level of consciousness where I can talk about this in a more regular pace of consciousness. I can talk to people. I can work with people.
So how long did you stay at Inner Fire?
I stayed at Inner Fire for about maybe a year and a month, about there. Yeah, a year and a month.
And when you were there, how many people were there and how many were guides? And
number of patient, or they call them seeker here. Seeker, I believe at one time they had maybe 5 or 6 might have been the max number we actually had at one point. Yep. And then eventually, one person left, and then another person left, and then I finally left. And staff wise, I'm not so sure, maybe 11, 12 or something like that. I think we have at one time.
as guides?
That's a guide. Yeah, that's a
Okay.
guide. So guide are the people who's mainly here just holding the space. They help with activities and cooking and all these day-to-day activity. So they're not the therapist, but they're just there to hold the space and there for us if we need any help. So they're the main staff members. And there was additional therapists, doing different therapy, spatial dynamic or artistic or music or whatever. So there were those therapists that was separate.
And so now you're back as a guide?
Yep. Yep. And I'm working on getting my license transferred to Vermont so I can be a nurse here too as well. Yeah.
Wonderful. Wonderful. And how long have you been back as a guide?
I've been as a guide for almost a month now. Almost a month. Yeah. Just trying to learn what I can do to help out. Yeah.
So what would you say has been one of the more healing or beneficial aspects of your year at Inner Fire for you personally?
I really think many of these therapeutic modality really did help. Artistic therapy and getting in touch with my emotion, just having that space to feel safe, to be able to express our emotional side. At least for me, because I was a really hyper masculine kind of macho kind of guy. I'm not in touch with my feeling. I can endure any kind of pain. That's the kind of person I was. And I couldn't believe how much out of touch I was with my feelings. And I didn't know that was actually contributing to many of my symptoms and pain that I had internally. So just having the nurturing space to be able to talk about our emotion, especially with other male guide was very impactful for me, because I never spent like extended time period with another male who was in touch with his feeling and was able to talk about it without shame, and was able to cry without shame, who was also masculine. I never had that kind of human being in front of me before. So when I actually was able to be in that kind of presence, that really had a big impact on me. It really felt like I really felt safe that, oh, I can do it too, because this other guy is doing it. Or I felt I saw this guy who, was really masculine, but at the same time, he sings beautifully, you know, and I'm like, oh, maybe I can sing too. It's okay for me too. Oh, he's not gonna make fun of me. No, he sees that I'm trying, and it's okay. And I can change my behavior because somebody else is doing this other behavior that's not so commonly found in society. But it's very important, and that I felt that was very impactful for me. And I think another thing is being able to talk about many tough issues that a lot of people are not informed about. I think being able to talk to somebody like Beatrice, who is informed about the history of the psychiatric care in this country, and the pharmaceutical paradigm, and she personally have seen in Europe how they were able to heal people, and they seen this. She firsthand saw how people were able to recover and reclaim their life without medication, and just being in her presence and talking to her and picking her brain, and just me being able to give her emotion that not many people can take, anger and resentment towards the industry, because I'm a part of the industry. I was perpetuating this paradigm. I felt so much anger to myself when not being able to see it, and toward other people too who was perpetuating it still. And I really felt like it was very therapeutic for me to actually talk to and being in the presence of somebody who understands all that, but despite that, she still can do her work and still help in the way that she can, and that doesn't comply to the current existing paradigm. So that was very powerful for me. Seeing that this frail older lady standing up against like a huge force, and it gave me courage to, I can do the work too. I can get there too, because I see this person do it. And and I looked around, but there really isn't that many people visibly who is like that. And so that really gave me a huge courage to really change.
Wonderful. Well, I greatly appreciate your willingness to share your story and your work at Inner Fire. As I notice that we're running out of the time here, if you could just take a breath or two and settle in and think, okay, so what's something that you wanted to share with our audience that you might not have mentioned yet, or something you want to go back to and highlight, just as we wrap up? What would you want to leave our audience with?
I really feel that at time we might feel that we're trapped in a system, and I think for a long time I saw I can change the system from the inside. This is something new I'm working on. And when it comes to changing somebody, I really think that we cannot change somebody by presenting them different information. They have to be open to the information, and they have to be willing to have the courage to change. And when it comes to this big issue, if we want to make a difference, I really feel that we have to seek other people who feel the same. And there are people out there who is experienced the exact same thing. And I'm just grateful for Dr. Hayes, like you, who gives a platform so that these stories can go out, and so that other people can see that, hey, there's people just exactly like me, facing the exact same issue. There is an issue, there is a problem. And I really felt that it was that's a very important thing to do. Instead of trying to convince somebody who's not willing to be convinced, we have to find other people who is not looking at the problem but looking at the solution, because we have to keep on putting energy into the solution. We can't just keep on looking at the problem and try to fix it, even though some people think that's the same thing. But in attitude, it really isn't. It really isn't when it comes to how we do it. So we really have to pay attention to where we put our energy. And I'm very grateful to be able to put my energy into a solution that does work. And I really hope that other people out there who is maybe still working for the system start putting effort and really put their energy into a solution, find a solution and see what they can do to be part of the solution. And they might be challenged for that they have to face. They might have to do a lot of inner work. They might have to, face many of the chains that's actually chaining them to the system. But I really hope that, they willing to take that leap of faith and jump off and know that it will be taken care of, because I really think we are very strong as a group. Yeah.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Well, I don't know if you know about Mad in America as a website, but I think that'd be a wonderful place for you to share your story if you have any inclination to write about this as well. So, Robert Whitaker, who wrote a couple of books on the mental health, Mad in America is one of the books he wrote, and another one was the Anatomy of an Epidemic, all about the psychotropic meds and how much they help and where and when and how much they create problems on top of problems. And so that Mad in America website is a place where people like you can share their story and stay abreast of changes that are happening and coordinate with other people who are looking for solutions the way you're talking about it. So I just want to thank you so much for joining us. And I look forward to hearing how your work there progresses as a guide at Inner Fire. And say hello to Beatrice for me.
I will. Thank you so much.
All right. Blessings. Ken Ijichi is a nurse who has worked diligently in his career to help others. And when he himself had a mental health challenge, he acquired lived experience of the difficulties of navigating through a system that just wants to treat symptoms with medications. He was lucky enough to get connected to Inner Fire in Vermont, and through his work at Inner Fire, his own personal work, he has decided to stay on and become a guide for others. Ken will tell us a little bit about his personal story and how he feels the work at Inner Fire is unique and exceptionally effective.
You've been listening to the On Your Mind podcast, offered by Journey's Dream, where we support people through mental health challenges to a place of true and lasting well-being. If you love our show, we invite you to visit onyourmindpodcast.org to join the conversation, access the show notes, and discover our helpful resources. Thank you for listening.